The sun over the Dust Bowl planet of Xerxes was a merciless, white-hot coin in a bleached sky. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the scents of ozone, frying oil, and the pervasive, fine red dust that coated everything. The bazaar at the edge of the spaceport was a chaotic symphony of shouted deals, clanging metal, and the low hum of repulsor lifts. This was Kellen's world, a place of forgotten things and desperate people, and he moved through it with the quiet, observant grace of a man who knew how to find value in what others discarded. He was a salvager. His life contained within the worn hull of his ship, the starlit freighter, which sat on a landing pad not far away. His clothes were practical, stained from engine grease and dust, and his eyes, a calm and steady gray, missed nothing. He was here to trade for water reclamation parts, his current cargo of scavenged machine components needing a final piece to be worth a damn. Anywhere else, that's when he saw the commotion. A crowd had gathered around a stall selling scrap servo motors, but they weren't looking at the wares. Their attention was focused on a figure huddled against a support beam. A woman, even from a distance, Kellen could see why they had gathered. One half of her body, from her temple down her arm and across her torso, was covered in a grotesque, beautiful, and terrifying latticework of crystalline scarring. It wasn't a growth, but a transformation, as if her very skin had been fused with shards of smoky quartz and amethyst, catching the harsh light in sharp, painful glints. It looked heavy, unyielding. Beast, a man shouted, throwing a handful of dust that stuck to the damp patches on her tattered clothes. Filth, you scare away decent customers. Another voice, shriller, joined in. They should have left you in the wreckage. Your bad luck. The woman, Anya, did not cry out. She kept her head down, her one visible eye, a startlingly deep shade of violet, fixed on the ground. Her shoulders were tense, a captured animal waiting for the blow to fall. Her hands, one flesh and one crystalline, were clenched into white-knuckled fists at her sides. She was thrown into this human trash heap, deemed worthless and monstrous. Kellen felt no surge of heroic anger. He felt a colder, more familiar emotion, a profound understanding of being cast aside. He saw the way she held herself, not with weakness, but with a reserves of strength that was rapidly depleting. He saw the person, not the scars. The crowd's taunts grew louder. Someone else lobbed a piece of rotten fruit. It was then that Kellen moved. He didn't shove or shout. He simply walked through the crowd, his presence causing a slight ripple in the mob's energy. He stopped between Anya and her tormentors, his back to her, facing the man who seemed to be the stall owner. You're disrupting the flow of commerce, Kellen said, his voice low but carrying over the noise. He gestured with his chin towards his own parked sled of trade goods. I was about to make an offer on those servo motors, but I can't focus with this nonsense. The stall owner, a thick-set man with a perpetual scowl, blinked. This thing is bad for business. Look at it. She, Kellen corrected, his tone utterly neutral, is a potential asset. You're treating her as a liability, a poor business model. He reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a single, slender chip of polished blue metal. It was a water credit from the hydroponic orbitals, one of the most universally valued currencies in the sector. It represented a month of clean drinking water. The crowd fell silent. The stall owner's eyes widened. I'll take her contract off your hands, Kellen said, his gaze unwavering. For this, a murmur ran through the onlookers. It was an insane offer. For a monster. For trash. The stall owner licked his lips, his greed warring with his superstition. Greed won, as it always did in Xerxes. He snatched the water credit from Kellen's hand. She's yours, and good riddance. The beast is your problem now. Kellen didn't look back at Anya. He simply turned and started walking towards his ship. He didn't need to check if she was following. He had just bought her for the price of a king's ransom, and the alternative was to remain in that circle of hell. He heard the faint, shuffling steps behind him, the slight, gritty sound of crystalline flesh dragging through dust. When they reached the ramp of the starlit freighter, he finally turned. She stood a few feet away, her violet eye wide with a mixture of terror, confusion, and a flicker of defiant pride. Why? The word was a hoarse whisper, scraped from a throat to use to silence. Kellen looked at her, truly looked, past the scars, seeing the sharp line of her jaw. the intelligence in her eye, the stubborn set of her mouth. He saw not a beast, but a survivor. Because, he said, his voice as quiet as hers, no one should be thrown away. And because I have a feeling you see things others don't. He gestured towards the open hatch. It's not much, but it's safe, and the water is free. For a long moment, she didn't move, just studied his face, searching for the trap, the cruelty, the trick. Finding none, she took a hesitant step forward, then another, crossing the threshold from the brutal, sun-scorched world into the cool, dimly lit belly of the ship. The ramp hissed closed behind her, sealing them in a new, uncertain silence. The ramp sealed with a definitive hiss, cutting off the blinding sun and the raucous noise of the bazaar. The sudden quiet inside the starlit freighter was a physical presence, thick and heavy. The air was cool, smelling of recycled oxygen, lubricant, and something faintly metallic. Anya stood frozen just inside the cargo hold, her single visible eye darting around, taking in the stacked crates, the security equipment, the narrow corridor leading deeper into the ship. She was waiting for the other boot to drop, for the demand, for the reveal of the true price of her rescue. Cullen didn't speak. He moved past her, his movements economical and quiet, and went to a wall panel. He tapped a sequence, and a soft, ambient glow filled the hold from recessed lighting, banishing the harsh shadows. He then went to a small storage locker, pulled out a clean, gray blanket, and held it out to her. "It's cold at altitude," he said, his voice still that same low, even tone. He didn't force it on her, just held it there until, after a long, hesitant moment, she reached out with her flesh and blood hand and took it. The fabric was soft, a stark contrast to the rough, grimy clothes she wore. He then turned and walked towards the cockpit. This way. Anya wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, the warmth already seeping into her bones. She followed him, her steps silent on the grated floor. The cockpit was compact, filled with navigational arrays and screens, but it was clean and orderly. Through the large viewport, the red sands of Xerxes stretched out to a jagged horizon. Cullen slid into the pilot's chair, his fingers dancing across the console with practiced ease. Strapping in as advised, he mentioned, not looking back at her. Anya found a jump seat behind him and fumbled with the harness, her crystalline fingers clumsy against the buckle. She finally managed, just as a deep thrum vibrated through the ship's frame. The engines whined to life, a low, powerful hum that she felt in her teeth. The starlit freighter lifted smoothly, the bazaar shrinking below into a messy speck of ant-like activity. Then, with a gentle push, they were climbing, the sky darkening from bleached white to deep blue, then to the black of space, studded with the sharp, unwinking light of stars. She had never been off-world. The sight stole her breath. The vast, silent majesty of it was a stark opposite to the cramped, violent existence she had known. She found herself pressing her forehead against the cool transperistal, watching Xerxes become a rust-colored ball behind them. Kylie and set a course, engaged the autopilot, and finally turned to look at her. "We'll be in the drift for a few hours. You're safe here. Why did you do it?" she asked again, the question more insistent now, the first shock wearing off. "That water credit. You could have bought a new engine for that. Not me." He considered her, his gray eyes calm. "An engine doesn't have a will to survive. I've spent my life collecting things others have thrown away. Sometimes, the most valuable things are the ones people are too blind to see." "You don't know what I am," she whispered, a tremor in her voice. "What this is," she gestured vaguely at her scarred half. "I know it's a part of you," he replied. "It doesn't define you. Not to me." He stood up. "You're hungry, and you need to get clean." He led her to the ship's small galley and living area. It was as tidy as the cockpit. He heated a packet of stew in the food synthesizer and placed it on the small table. With a cup of water, the smell made her stomach clench with a hunger she had long suppressed. He left her there, retreating to give her privacy. Anya ate slowly at first, then ravenously, the simple flavors exploding on her tongue. When she was done, she found the sanitizer unit. She stood inside the small cubicle, letting the sonic waves vibrate the grime and dust from her skin and clothes. It couldn't clean the soul, but it was a start. When she emerged, feeling strangely light and raw, She found a set of clean, soft clothes by the size folded neatly on a crate outside. Later, she found him in the cockpit, staring out at the star-dusted void. She stood in the doorway, unsure. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Nowhere, for now," he said. "Just away. I have a lead on a salvage job. A derelict in the Lyra Nebula. It can wait." They lapsed into silence again, but it was different now. The tension had eased, replaced by a weary, shared quiet. He didn't press her for her story, and she didn't offer it. He simply accepted her presence, a solid, unassuming anchor in the vastness of space. As the ship drifted, one of Xerxes' moons, a great silver orb, rose into view from behind the planet. Its light streamed through the viewport, illuminating the cockpit. It caught the facets of Enya's crystalline scars, making them glitter with a soft, internal fire. She usually hid from such light, but here, in the safe, quiet space, she didn't flinch. She let the moonlight wash over her. Kaeli watched the light play across her face, across the intricate, painful-looking lattice. He didn't see a monster. He saw a woman forged in some unimaginable fire, a living piece of art, tragic and beautiful. He saw the person she was beneath it all, and in the quiet language of the stars, he began to understand that buying her contract wasn't an act of charity. It was the best trade he had ever made. Days bled into one another aboard the starlit freighter, marked only by the shifting star patterns and the rhythm of their quiet coexistence. Anya learned the ship's sounds, the hum of the life support, the click of cooling metal, the soft chime of navigation alerts. She learned Kellen's patterns, to his methodical checks of the systems, his quiet focus during repairs, the way he always left a portion of food for her before taking his own. He had given her a datapad with access to the ship's limited library, mostly technical manuals and star charts, but also a few volumes of old Earth poetry. She devoured them, the words a balm to a part of her she thought had died. She began to help with small tasks, sorting components, cleaning filters. It was a silent offer of partnership, and he accepted it with a nod. Their destination was the ghost ship Silver Dawn, a luxury star yacht lost in an asteroid field within the Lyra Nebula. Its distress beacon had flickered to life briefly before dying. A siren's call for salvagers. "The field is dense," Kellen said, his hands steady on the controls as they approached the glittering, dangerous cloud. "Scans are unreliable. We'll have to do this the old-fashioned way." Anya stood beside his chair, her hand resting on it for balance. The nebula outside was a breathtaking swirl of violet and magenta gas, and the asteroids tumbled like a child's forgotten marbles. Nestled among them was the sleek, elegant shape of the Silver Dawn, its hull pitted and scarred. A few viewports dark and empty. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's a tomb," he replied, but his voice was gentle. "Stay close to me." They suited up and crossed the short void between the ships, their mag boots clamping onto the derelict's hull. Inside, the ship was a frozen moment in time. Fine dust coated everything, and emergency lights cast long, eerie shadows. They moved through opulent lounges and silent corridors, their helmet lights cutting beams through the gloom. Kaelen was looking for the ship's log. The black box. Anya followed, but her attention was drawn elsewhere. The crystalline scarring on her body, which usually felt like a dead weight, began to thrum with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. It was a sensation she'd felt only once before, in the deep caves of Xerxes, where she'd been caught in the mineral storm that had transformed her. She reached out with her crystalline hand, letting her fingers brush a bulkhead. She closed her eyes, focusing. "Kellen," her voice was a staticky whisper over the comms. "This way." He turned, surprised. "The bridge is the other direction. Trust me," she said, the words foreign on her tongue. She had trusted no one in a very long time. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Lead the way." She followed the subtle resonance, a whisper only she could hear. It led them away from the grand spaces, down a narrow service corridor to a plain, unmarked door. The control panel was dead. "It's behind here," she said. "Something important." Kellen didn't question how she knew. He used a plasma cutter to slice through the lock. The door slid open with a groan, revealing not a storage closet, but a hidden vault. Inside, nestled in shock-absorbent foam, were data spheres, the ship's encrypted financial records, and a small case of uncut other gems. Stones that could power a small city. Impossible, Kellen breathed. The scans showed nothing. How did you? Before she could answer, a new voice crackled over an open frequency, harsh and grating. Well, looks like the trash picker struck gold. Step away from the vault, Vale. We'll be taking that. A figure in scarred, aggressive-looking combat armor stepped into the corridor, a heavy pulse rifle leveled at them. Behind him were two others, Rorik, a rival salvager with a reputation for violence and claiming others' finds. Kellen moved instantly, pushing Anya back into the vault and placing himself in the doorway. This is my claim, Rorik. Back off. Your claim? Rorik laughed. I don't see your name on it. I just see you and your pet monster. His helmeted gaze shifted to Anya, and she flinched at the familiar venom. Now move. Kellen stood his ground, his hand drifting to the blaster at his hip. The standoff was tense, seconds from exploding into violence. Anya's mind raced. Fear threatened to paralyze her. But then she looked at Kellen's back, a solid wall shielding her. He had seen her, not a monster, but a person. He had given her safety, silence, and a blanket. He was facing down three armed men for their find. Her eyes darted around the vault. Past the glittering gems, she saw the ship's internal schematics on a wall panel. She saw the emergency conduit for routing power during a core breach. An idea, desperate and brilliant, sparked in her mind. With her crystalline hand, she reached out and slammed it against the conduit access panel. The unique mineral composition of her scars conducted energy in strange ways. A surge of power, diverted from the ship's dying batteries, flared through her. It was agonizing, a white-hot jolt, but she gritted her teeth and held on. Outside in the corridor, every single emergency light and alarm blared to life at once, strobing and screaming in a deafening cacophony. The sudden sensory overload blinded and disoriented Rorik and his men. In that split second of confusion, Kellen acted. He didn't fire his blaster. He lunged forward, grabbed the barrel of Rorik's rifle, and slammed the man's helmet into the bulkhead with a sickening crack. The other two, stunned by the lights and noise, were easy to disarm with two swift, precise strikes. In less than 10 seconds, it was over. Rorik and his crew were unconscious on the floor. The alarms died down, the ship returning to its tomb-like silence. Kellen turned back to the vault. Anya was slumped against the wall, her crystalline hand smoking slightly, her whole body trembling. He was at her side in an instant, his hands on her shoulders. Anya, look at me. Are you hurt? She looked up, her violet eye wide with shock and pain, but also with a fierce new light. I saved us? He cupped her face, his thumb gently stroking her unmarred cheek. His gray eyes were no longer just calm. They were blazing with admiration and something else, something warmer. You did, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You were brilliant, in the quiet of the derelict ship, surrounded by the evidence of her worth. The last of Enya's defenses crumbled. She hadn't just saved their lives. She had saved herself, proving that the very thing that made her a monster in the eyes of the world could be her greatest strength in the eyes of the one who mattered. The return to the starlit freighter was a blur of adrenaline and quiet urgency. Kellen's focus was absolute, his movements swift as he secured the other gems and data spheres, disabled Rorik's ship, and plotted a swift course out of the asteroid field. But his attention kept returning to Anya, who sat silently in the co-pilot's seat, cradling her still smoking crystalline hand. The moment they hit the calm of open space, he was out of his chair, kneeling before her. Let me see, he said, his voice soft. She hesitated, then offered her hand. The crystalline lattice was duller than usual, webbed with fine hairline fractures where the energy had surged through it. It wasn't bleeding, but it clearly pained her. I'm sorry, she whispered, misinterpreting his intense scrutiny. It's ugly. Kellen looked up, his gaze capturing hers. No, he said, the word absolute. It's a testament. It's proof of your courage. He reached into a medkit and carefully applied a cool, soothing biogel to the stressed crystal. Does that help? A shuddering breath escaped her. The gel was already numbing the deep, throbbing ache. No one had ever tended to her scars before. They were something to be reviled, ignored. His care felt more intimate than any touch she had ever known. "Yes," she breathed. "Thank you," he finished, his fingers lingering for a moment on her wrist before he pulled away. The air in the cockpit was charged, thick with all the unspoken things that had passed between them in the wreckage. The professional distance, the careful silence, had been irrevocably shattered. "Come with me," he said, standing and offering her his hand. "There's something I want to show you." Puzzled, she took his hand, her flesh and blood one, and let him lead her deep into the ship, to a section she hadn't seen before. He keyed open a door, and the air that washed over them was different. It was humid, fragrant, alive. Anya stepped through and gasped. It was a garden, a small, hydroponic bay tucked away in the heart of the freighter. The walls were lined with tiers of plants growing under the soft, purple light of sun lamps. There were herbs with silvery leaves, vines with delicate, bell-shaped flowers, and in the center, a small tree with bioluminescent blue fruit that cast a gentle, ethereal glow. The air hummed with the sound of circulating water and the faint, sweet scent of blooming night flowers. It was a pocket of pure, nurtured life in the cold, metallic vastness of space. "This is impossible," she whispered, stepping forward to trail her fingers over a velvety leaf. "It's my secret," Kellen said, leaning against the doorframe, watching her wonder. "My rebellion, a reminder that you can cultivate beauty, even when you're surrounded by nothing but dust and vacuum." Anya turned to face him, the bioluminescent light from the fruit catching the facets of her scars, making them gleam like a constellation etched onto her skin. In this place, she didn't feel like a monster. She felt like she belonged. She felt beautiful. "You see things others don't," she said, echoing his words from the bazaar. "I see you, Anya," he replied, his voice low and earnest. He pushed away from the door and walked to her, stopping just inches away. The space between them crackled. "I see your strength, your intelligence, your resilience. I see the woman who saved my life today." Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She could see the same raw emotion reflected in his gray eyes, the fear of what had almost happened, the relief that they were safe, and something deeper, warmer, that had been growing since he first draped a blanket over her shoulders. "Kellen." Her voice failed her. He didn't speak. He simply raised his hand and, with infinite slowness, brushed his knuckles against the crystalline plane of her cheek. The touch was feather-light, a question. She leaned into it, her eyes fluttering closed, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her human cheek. That was all the answer he needed. He bent his head and kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, but of profound tenderness, a slow, hesitant meeting of lips that spoke of trust built in quiet moments, of a bond forged in silence and sealed in danger. It was a promise. When he pulled back, they were both breathing raggedly. Anya opened her eyes, her violet gaze clear and unguarded for the first time. The fear was gone, replaced by a dawning, wondrous hope. She reached up, her good hand curling around the back of his neck, and pulled him down for another kiss. This one was surer, filled with all the words they hadn't known how to say. In the garden of glass and starlight, surrounded by living, growing things, the salvager and the scarred woman found a different kind of treasure. They had gone into the wreckage looking for profit, and had emerged with something infinitely more valuable, a reason to no longer travel the stars alone. The starlit freighter descended through the hazy atmosphere of Xerxes, its familiar, rust-colored landscape rising to meet it. The same bazaar sprawled at the edge of the spaceport, just as loud, just as dusty, just as cruel. But this time, everything was different. Anya stood beside Kellen in the cockpit, no longer hovering in the doorway. She wore practical, well-fitted clothes theirs now, and her posture was straight, her chin held high. The storm veil he had once imagined for her was unnecessary. She had no intention of hiding. As the ramp lowered, the same old smells and sounds washed over them. A few faces turned their way, recognition, and then disdain dawning in their eyes. Whispers began to snake through the crowd. The beast, the monster, and the fool who bought her. The stall owner who had sold her noticed them and sneered, elbowing his neighbor. "Look, the trash came back. Probably too much trouble even for him." Kellen ignored him. He hefted a crate from their salvage, a few of the less valuable, but still impressive, artifacts from the Silver Dawn, and walked towards a reputable dealer he knew. Anya walked with him, her stride matching his, her shoulder brushing his arm. The taunts grew louder, more direct. "Did she poison your water, salvager?" Someone jeered. Anya stopped. Kellen stopped with her, his gaze questioning. She gave him a small, steady nod. She was ready. She turned to face the heckler, her violet eyes calm and clear. She didn't speak. She simply looked at him, allowing him to see her fully, the elegant, sharp lines of her crystalline, half gleaming in the sun, the quiet confidence in her human eye. She let him see that she was not ashamed, not afraid, and that she was not alone. The man's mocking smile faltered under her silent, unwavering gaze. He looked away, muttering, and melted back into the crowd. The space around them grew quiet. Kellen completed his trade, securing a small fortune in credits and the parts he needed. As they turned to leave, the stall owner who had once thrown dust at her could only stare, his mouth agape at the obvious wealth and partnership he witnessed. Back on the ship, as Kellen began the pre-flight sequence, Anya stood at the viewport, watching the bazaar shrink away for what she knew would be the last time. She felt no triumph, only a quiet, solid peace. "Where to now?" Kellen asked, his hand resting on the navigation console. She walked over and placed her hand over his, her crystalline fingers interlacing with his warm, calloused ones. "Anywhere," she said, a soft smile gracing her lips. "Home is right here." Months later, the starlit freighter was a different place. Anya's datapads of poetry now sat alongside his technical manuals. Her hand-woven blanket was draped over the back of the pilot's chair. The hydroponic garden had new, vibrant additions that she tended with a gentle touch. They were partners in every sense of the word. She could navigate the trade routes as well as he could, and her unique perception made her an unparalleled spotter for salvage. They had built a life, not from grand plans, but from a series of choices to trust, to stand together, to love. One evening, drifting in a quiet sector far from any world, they sat in their garden. The bioluminescent fruit cast its soft, blue glow, and the stars outside the viewport were a brilliant, dense tapestry. "Do you ever think about it?" Anya asked softly, her head resting on his shoulder. "The bazaar? What they called me?" Kellen pressed a kiss into her hair. "Sometimes. I think they called you a monster because they were too small to see a constellation." He traced the line of her scars with a reverent finger. "They saw a flaw. I see a map of the stars we've traveled together." Anya closed her eyes, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The world had thrown her away, deemed her unlovable, vermin. But in the vast, indifferent cosmos, a man had seen her. He had not just loved her despite her scars. He had loved her for the strength they represented, for the story they told. The starlit freighter sailed on, a tiny, bright speck in the infinite dark. Inside, it carried a universe of its own, a universe built on silence, salvaged from wreckage, and cultivated in a garden of glass and starlight. They were no longer a salvager and a scarred woman. They were Kellen and Anya, a constellation of their own, proving that the deepest love is often found not in perfection, but in the beautiful, broken, and lovingly repaired pieces of a shared life.